The dead border, the one that Jimmy had never heard of, that's not on any maps. That was where Jimmy decided the events of their patrol had escalated from bizarre to downright macabre midway through the fourth day. As the two riders approached it, despite the ever-gray skies, it had been impossible to miss, though a low-set fog had reduced the visibility to a quarter mile or less. A piercing line of contrast could be seen, cleanly cleaving the forest into two distinct zones ahead of them. On their side, dense green pines and lush spruce thickets that had garnished the majority of their journey, and on the other side, straight ahead, the forest was sun-bleached white and dead. "What is this place up ahead?" asked Jimmy, willing to risk belittlement. "I've never heard of anything that looks—" "Forest fire, long ago," interrupted Frank. "All that's left behind is bones." Jimmy had been unsettled by Frank since they'd first met days prior. The skinny old prick didn't leave a lot for warming up to after all, and perhaps it was just the marble white tree boneyard into which they rode, Jimmy remembered thinking. But the way Frank had said what he did shook Jimmy. All that was left were bones. The eerie scenery couldn't have done a better job of helping that creepy bastard in setting his spooky tone. As if on some sinister cue, just as the men crossed over the border into the dead forest, Frank began to digress. "The Crow people won't cross into this place. No will the Cheyenne. Nobody's old enough to remember exactly why, but the elders say these are wicked lands, that they're evil. Now can you imagine such preposterousness?" he asked rhetorically, smiling his impossibly wide, chilling, crook-toothed smile. Though Jimmy knew it to be ridiculous, he thought Frank's grin stretched wider, even than usual, as if reaching out to split his skull in half across the middle. That horrible winter-white smile combined with Frank's thin, balding skull and sunken-in eyes atop his tall, lanky frame. He looked especially skeletal. Yes, though Jimmy knew it was absolutely improbable, he could almost swear that Frank's limbs seemed to be even longer, even lankier than before, that Frank's fingers seemed to have extended, appearing more claw-like, his fingers becoming longer and more nimble. Back on the fourth day, as they crossed the dead border, Jimmy had tried to push it out of his mind, for he did not know that that would be his last chance to turn back. On the morning of the fifth day, as he ate his biscuit and drank his coffee by the fire, Jimmy came to a horrible realization, made all the more troubling by the events of the previous 2 days, and further worsened by his growing distrust in his new partner. The game trail they'd been following had ended, sometime the day prior. Jimmy didn't even notice, apparently, as he had been lost in an awestruck melancholy brought about by their fire-bleached deadwood surroundings after crossing the border that day. More worrying was the rapidly deteriorating weather. Snow fell in thin, sharp flakes, and it looked like as though the storm would only grow. Jimmy packed his horse silently alongside Frank until his sense of urgency got the better of his wish to avoid scorn. "Frank, I don't reckon you'd see your way into going over the map with me," asked Jimmy nervously. "It's only that, well, we're off the game trail now, and I figure we both should be familiar in case we have to split." Frank shook his head sternly, silencing Jimmy. "Map? Son, the only map out here is this one," he scoffed, pointing to his right temple. "And this little doohickey." Frank produced a lump from his coat pocket and tossed it to Jimmy. It was a compass of Spartan build, to put it mildly, with the NSEW etched with some kind of sharp point into the exposed, shaking tin dial, along with the name Jacob on the backplate. "You can hold on to that if it'll keep your bonnet unbunched. Don't need it after all these years anyhow. You can spare me your judgments on the build quality, as it was your predecessors." "What happened to him, by the way, if you don't mind my asking, Frank?" croaked Jimmy, regretting it instantly. He hadn't truly wanted to know, he thought. Frank grinned his horrible grin. Yes, a wider grin now, more sinister, Jimmy was sure, and pointed his long, spindly finger directly up into the snowfall. "These storms, Jimmy! You get lost in them like that," he exclaimed, snapping his fingers. Jimmy swore he'd seen a new, foreboding twinkle in Frank's eyes as he did so. "Speaking of, the storm be an ugly one by the looks of it, so you'll stick to me like a fly on a shit wagon. If you're smart and line with all that, let the compass serve as a warning to you, more than a bearing, you hear? It's the last living piece anyone will see of old Jake, and 100 times more than you'll find if most fools met the ends out here. Now let's get riding, and follow me closely for Christ's sake," he said, mounting his horse. The men rode northward. Jimmy checked the compass from time to time as the morning faded to afternoon, the snowfall now having grown into a still, windless whiteout. Just as the men prepared to stop for a midday meal, a dark silhouette appeared out of the snow ahead of them. Beyond some trees, as they drew nearer, the shape of a tent and camp could be made out, inside of a tight clearing. On the far side of the shanty, 2 lean mountain ponies stood hitched to a tree, yanking nervously at their reins. "Should we post up somewhere out of sight for a bit and watch for activity?" asked Jimmy. "Could be danger, right?" "Won't be necessary, son. Use your eyes," replied Frank, gesturing towards the tent. "That thing's got 2 inches of snow on it, and it's only snowed 1 inch since morning. These folks are long gone. Have been since yesterday evening at the very least." Frank smiled his bone-chilling smile, now easily the widest part of his impossibly thin skull. Sure enough, as they crossed the camp's perimeter, it was clear that the ponies were near starving. They had not been fed for days, at best having eaten themselves out of reachable grazing grass. Jimmy, ever the keen observer, started to add things up. Nobody would willingly leave these kinds of supplies out here. At least, not if anything good happened to them, and especially not horses. Surveyed around his boots, no foot tracks, sans Frank's and his own. Could rule out a bear or wolf ambush, as a mere inch or 2 of snow wouldn't sufficiently bury evidence of the ensuing struggle, and nothing of the sort could be seen. Besides, Jimmy had mused, upon seeing ammunition cases inside the tent, much to his chagrin. What in the world would take down well-armed men, yet leave horses unharmed, tied defenselessly to trees? Jimmy massaged his brow in disquieted confusion. Puzzling. "Son, I keep telling you over and over," chuckled Frank from behind. "Yeah, Frank, I get it, alright," Jimmy hissed, forgetting himself in his growing panic, balling his fists in frightened rage. "I won't believe what I find out here," he said mockingly, trying to keep the nervous tremble out of his voice. "Well, I believe it's just fine, Frank. Believe me." He spun around towards Frank. "And you need to start taking all of this more serious." Frank was nowhere in sight. Jimmy was alone. With that, his final nugget of remaining fortitude vanished. With a lightning-like haste, Jimmy mounted his horse and rode onward, continuing north. He wanted nothing to do with the deserted camp at that point, and his wits were shaken far beyond use. He rode at a brisk trot, as fast as the terrain would allow through the night and still on through the next day, lost in a terrified stupor. He stopped and made camp only when the blizzard rendered further passage impossible. As he pitched his tent, he could swear he heard a voice on the evening wind. It was cackling,